Hi everyone, welcome back for another video, and hello to anyone that is new to this channel. Today we are bringing back a very popular topic, which is Pokemon, and I'm excited to bring a new Pokemon to life for you. And for today's episode, we're going to go with the original legendary Pokemon, Mewto. So, without further ado, let's jump right to this video and let's get started. Alright, so here's our main picture that we're going to work with, and we're going to start with the legs first. So we're going to turn on this 3D asset here from Mewto Elements, this monster leg. We're going to use this as the main texture for the leg. So we're just going to position this with the right leg, warp it into place, make sure that it kind of fits the same way that the illustration is, and then of course just masking out all the parts that we don't need. Alright, so that looks good. We're going to add a levels adjustment on top of this just to brighten it up a little bit so it's not so dark. And somewhere right around here looks good. We're going to follow that up with a hue and saturation adjustment layer to try and match that light purple lavender skin tone that Mewto has. And I think this is a good foundation for right now. So let's start working on the other leg. Same thing. I got a few different positions of this 3D asset just to help us out here. So we're going to do the same thing with this leg. And all I'm going to do is just copy or just make a copy of the levels and hue and saturation on this leg, so you can see here. That's going to help us out. We're going to do that quite a bit. So we're just going to work further down here, and we're going to start working kind of on this shin area of the left leg, or Mewtwo's right leg. So once we have this warped into place, just like so, we're going to do the same thing, mask it out, and then just apply those same effects on top of that. And then this looks a little janky here, so let's just make sure that that edge is blended in nicely, just like so. Excellent. Alright, so for the foot, I'm actually going to use this image here. I just wanted to add a little bit of texture here, and this had the right foot placement, so we're going with it. So we're just going to line that up appropriately here, add the mask, and paint this in. And then we can just kind of clean this up a little bit here. But you can see, I just wanted to keep like that vein texture and the ripples in the skin to help us out. And then we're using the puppet warp tool here just to make sure that it fits perfectly with that illustration. And once again, just applying the same levels and hue and saturation adjustment layers on top of that. Alright, so for the rest of the foot, as well as the other foot as well, we're just going to use the pen tool to make a selection and then just drop in a color. We're just going to sample a piece from the foot here that we were using, and then just paint a little bit of shadow here so we have a little bit of separation, and doing the same effect here on the other foot as well. Alright, so this is going to get us going. And then this 3D asset, we're just going to use for the bottom of the foot here. Just kind of the pads here. So we're just warping this into place. And I just want to use the toe here. So let's just paint this back in. Just something like this, and we can blend that in with the rest of the foot as well. Make sure that it looks consistent and that it all kind of looks like everything belongs to the same species here. That's what we're going for. We don't want it to look, you know, out of place. Alright, so we're going to do the same thing on this foot, and then once we have this in place, we're going to do the same exact steps to the other foot. So I'm not going to show you that, we just put it in place there just to save some time, but our legs are looking pretty good here. I'm just going to use a copy of this leg here and just go over this left leg just a little bit more. I didn't quite like the look of how it was placed a little bit on that left side, so this is just going to help us out, kind of get more of the vision that I have in mind here, just kind of make it anatomically look a little bit more accurate. So let's just blend that back in, bring some of that in, so that way the muscles kind of look aligned properly, and we can stretch this out a little bit so it follows along with kind of the contour of the shape towards the bottom there. Alright, so going back to these feet here, this is just gonna give us that softer texture for the shin here, so that's what I'm doing here. I know it looks a little rough right now, don't worry, we are going to clean this up. And so I'm flipping this around, and we're actually going to use the calf muscle for the quads here. Now, I just want to make that muscle look a little bit more pronounced. I don't want him to look so jacked. I don't want him to look like he's on steroids or anything like that, but, you know, he is an elite Pokemon, so I do kind of want to bring out the muscular features. And then we're just patching up some of these areas here, just making that texture consistent throughout the foot here. Just like I said before, we want to make sure that every part of this looks like it belongs to the same species. And we can lighten up just below here, something like this. But I'm pretty happy with this. Okay, so what we're going to do now is start working on the belly and the tail. So I'm going to make selections of that. And here we are in place. I've already got some colors in place to help us out when we are applying some textures here. First thing that we're going to do is just start giving it a little bit of depth. So I'm using this solid color adjustment layer. We're putting a nice dark color. Not in any blend mode, just normal, but we're going to start, giving it some depth and some shadow, just to make this look a little bit more three-dimensional and not so flat. So we're just going along the edges here again, just to give it a little bit of shape and some dimension. Alright, so this is rounding out to look pretty good. Let's go ahead and bring in our texture, and I've got like a nice little cellular looking texture which is going to be perfect for this part of the body. And we're going to make sure that we just change the hue and saturation to match a little bit of that darker purple color. And then we're going to warp this in place. Just do the same steps like we did with the other textures. We want to make sure that the texture is condensed or expanded appropriately to reflect the curvature of the body. And then we can just come in here and just blend it in so it's not so prominent. And I'm going to show you one more time with this part here, just to kind of show you my workflow. And for the rest of the tail, I'm just going to skip over it and complete it, since you already know the basic steps. Alright, so let's just come in here and fade this in. Just something like this. And bada bing bada boom, we have the rest of the tail complete. Let's move up to the core. And we're going to start just like what we did with the tail. We're just going to start adding a little bit of dimension here on the sides, rounding it out so it doesn't look so flat. Something like this. And what I want to have now is a little bit of a transition from that core to the tail. So I'm just lightening up this area here, and I'm just going to go a little bit heavy at first, and then we can scale back on the opacity so it looks a little bit more appropriate. Something right around here is, I think, the level that I'm looking for. Alright, so this alien guy is going to help us out with the core. This is perfect, and we're just going to warp this in place so that way everything lines up appropriately. Alright, and then I'm just gonna fade away some of these features at the top here. As mentioned before, I don't want him to look so jacked. He doesn't need to be Mr. Universe, but he's still gotta show some of that muscular attributes. Alright, so this looks good. I want to connect that leg to the core here. So we're using this copy here just to kind of stretch this out, and this is going to be a connector piece, so that way the leg actually looks like it's attached to the body, not just kind of sticking out there in space. So something right around here, and we can alternate between hard round tip brushes and soft tip just to get the right look that we want. And yeah, I like how that actually looks. I'm happy, I'm pleased with this. Alright, let's move on. Before we actually get to the chest, I just want to add a little bit more detail to this lower body. And we're going to start off with just adding a little bit more contrast in here, exaggerating some of these features. So I'm just painting in manually exaggerate some of the depth here that we have, just to again bring out the contrast and exaggerate these features. And we're going to work along a little bit on this left leg. Just, kind of bringing out the folds of the skin and exaggerating some of these muscles here. Also, if there's any little bit of piece of advice I can give, especially for stuff like this, is you want to have difference of hue and saturation. So that's what we're doing right now with this solid color, which we put into overlay. We're going to use this for the highlights, but having that color variation helps a lot, especially with your characters or just in work in general. So that left leg looks pretty good. I'm actually going to skip over the right leg, but I'm going to do the same thing and do this on my own time, but you're not going to see the process. So let's go ahead and see that result there with those finishing touches for the right leg. And so both legs are looking good. Let's continue on with this tail here and doing the same thing. So we're just going to darken up some of these areas, go along starting with the kind of the core right here, and we'll work our way to the back of the tail. Just taking our time with this, making some of these dark points just a little bit darker. And the cool thing about manually painting this in is you can just add some fun characteristics. So like right now I'm just adding a little bit of folding to the skin here, just painting some lines in there. And we can scale this back a little bit so it's not so prominent, but just giving those little characteristics just adds that little extra bit of detail to the piece, which is always great to have. All right, and so his lower body looks good, and let's continue on with the chest now. I've just filled this in with the same color as before, and for the chest, I'm really just going to manually paint this in and the details myself here. So just kind of knowing what I know, using the darker tones for the more sunken parts of the skin, or where the skin starts to curve, or pieces like here right by the chest, any adjoining muscles. So we can just add darker colors there. And you can see I'm just starting to paint in some lines. This is really rough draft at the moment. We're gonna add a little bit more detail later, but I'm just pretty loosey-goosey with this right now. And you know, we're gonna add all of those details in later. We're just being really rough with this. So let's just continue on here. We're gonna add a little bit more characteristic to the neck, give that a little bit of shaping. And you know, it doesn't gotta be anatomically correct. You know, he's an engineered Pokemon here. And let's follow this up with some highlights. So anywhere that the most outer portion of the texture that is protruding out, that's where you want to apply this highlight to. And right now I'm just kind of envisioning that the light is dead on. We're going to change that later once he's in the scenery, but for right now that's kind of what I've got going on. Alright, so for this belly here, I'm just changing this up a little bit because I want to kind of sell the effect that this tail is actually kind of coming from outside, or it's protruding into the body itself. So we're just painting this to really sell this effect. I thought that was going to be a nicer approach instead of just kind of fading it into the tail. I kind of like the idea that it's actually coming from inside, or it's actually attached and going into the body. So something like that. Yeah, that's looking pretty cool. So let's just kind of clean this up just a little bit more. And then of course we can give the tail a little bit of highlight as well. And yeah, there we have it. So I'm happy with this. We don't have much left, just gonna work on the arms and the head, and then we're pretty much done. So let's move on to the arm. So just like the chest, I'm just manually painting in the shaping itself. I've used a pen tool just to give us a selection, and if you command click on that selection, that's gonna give us this marching ant so we can paint inside that boundary box. And if you ever want to paint outside of that, you can press Shift Command I or Shift Control I if you're on a PC. That just kind of helps us out and makes this a little bit cleaner and more accurate when we're painting in this definition. So I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this hand here and just bring this to life. It's a lot of painting. I originally started out with adding textures onto this, but I didn't quite like the look of it. So once I actually started painting this myself, I kind of liked the overall appearance just a little bit better. So that's what I'm going with. And just like I did with the foot, if you just add in some little dart points like what I'm doing right now, you can see how the skin just looks like it's folding just a little bit. It just gives it just a little bit more character to the skin and not just a round piece. I'm just jumping around. There's that dart point again, so you can see that it just looks like the skin is folding in and out, and there's a little bit of curvature to it, so it's not so flat. Alright, so we're almost done with the hand here. We're making some great progress with this, and then we'll be moving on to the head shortly, but we're just wrapping up with the hand here first. And just like I did on the foot, I'm adding these lines in there. Again, just gives it that texture. Just a little something extra, a little bit of detail. And some bigger folds to the skin, just like you would see normally on your hand. I'm trying to mimic kind of those same attributes onto Mewto here. And getting out just sculpting out kind of the muscular features that I want, and then finishing this up with just a little bit of texture so that way, again, it's consistent with the rest of our body here. And you see I did it on the chest as well, which I didn't show before, but we just want to make the whole body consistent and the same texture is applied to all parts. So we're just about done here, just really exaggerating these bones. And then we can add a little bit more detail here just to make these collarbones pop just a little bit more. Right, and then we're going to wrap this up with that little attachment to the back of his head. And then we are just about done. We're going to be working on the head for the final piece. So here's everything. I've just added in the parts of the right hand as well. But we're almost done with this, ladies and gentlemen. He's looking really cool, so I'm excited to wrap this thing up. So let's go ahead and start with this head. And then we'll be moving on to putting him in the scene, and then putting a nice little bow on it, and then we'll call it a day. Alright, so let's move on to the head, and I apologize because it is a lot of repetitive steps here. But instead of just showing you, hey, here it is, I still want to show you my process so you can see the construction and the sculpting of this. Just like the rest of the body, or the majority of the body, the head, again, we're just doing a lot of manual painting here to create this structure. Now, it would be nice if I did have a program like ZBrush or something where I can do the sculpting in there, but I don't have that, so I'm just going to manually do these sculpting myself with just a little bit of painting. So, and you don't really see me doing it, but I'm actually going back and forth to that image just to kind of see where the parts of the body start to fold and where the, the eyebrow ridges are. So that's what I'm creating right now, just trying to create the eyebrow ridges. This actually gave me probably some of the most trouble out of the entire piece, was just trying to make that look correct. Now, it doesn't have to look exactly like the picture because, we are trying to make this look real life and, it's not going to look like a cartoon. So we can play around with it. So we're adding in the highlights, but kind of at this point, I'm just looking at it thinking, well, it doesn't quite look like the Mewto I had envisioned, but we're going with it. So let's start working on the eyes before we do any more. And we're using this eyeball here. We're just going to right click, use fill, and we're going to do content aware fill just to kind of get rid of this piece here. We'll do that a couple of times just to kind of give us a solid piece. So that's perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect right here. So we're going to scale this down, put it in its socket. Use the hue and saturation to find something a little bit more purple. We'll duplicate that. And I actually kind of like the look of that blue tone in there, so I'm going to flip the right eye as well. So we have that blue variation. It looks really cool. So let's give him some pupils and some little highlights. And then use an overlay color just to make these pop out just a little bit more. And we can add a little bit of glow to the eyes. And I want to adjust the ridge. But here's kind of a rough draft, and like I said, I'm not quite pleased with the structure of the face, so I'm going to go back in here and just alter this a little bit because I don't quite like the look of how it panned out. So again, I wanted to show you me kind of redoing some of these steps because this happens. It happens to everybody. It's not going to be perfect right on the first try, so it's a lot of trial and error. And as I mentioned before, this was the part that really gave me the most trouble with Mewto. So it's actually looking better. I think the progress is there. So let's just keep going at it. But we're going to just adjust this a little bit more and just try to give these the right frown lines. And then I'm going to use the liquify tool just to pull this out a little bit. The head actually kind of looks like Spyro the Dragon for anyone that remembers that character. But at this point, I'm actually really liking it. So I'm happy with how this is. And we'll do some more adjustments when it's in the scenery, but this looks great for right now. So let's go and put him in the scene, and let's really, like I said, put that nice little cherry on top. So we're going to build this up here, and we're going to first load in our background. So let's scale this up, and then we can add Mewto in just for scale and perspective here. Make sure that everything is the right relation that we want. All right, and then I'm just going to erase part of this because that's taking too much of this canvas. So let's get rid of this. Okay, and then we can go ahead and load in our space image. We're just going to adjust the hue here so it's a little bit darker. All right, and we can overall darken this entire scene with a little bit of levels, darken up the background. The light is going to be mainly up front, so I want to leave the front just a little bit lighter, and I want to change the tone of this so it's a little bit more magenta and blue, and not so just black. So there we go, we're giving it a little bit of color now, and now let's bring in our character. So really basic stuff just to build up a simple background. That's not going to be our main focal point, it's going to be Mewto. So right now I'm just adding a little bit of shadows underneath here. And I've darkened him up entirely, and now kind of doing this reverse engineer of painting back in the lights since we're in a nighttime scene. And what we're actually going to put on that left side is one of his moves, whether it be, you know, psychic, psybeam, whatever, but we're going to create like this little energy ball there, which that's going to be our main light source. So here that is. We're going to put this into a screen blend mode, and since we still see that box, we're just going to darken up the shadows a little bit more to get rid of that. Just like that. And then we're going to scale this down a little bit, put this right in the hand there of his left hand, or his right arm. And maybe we'll scale this up just a little bit. But let's adjust it, because I don't really like the green. We're going to stick with like the blues and purple color scheme here. And then what we're going to do here is start to just add layer by layer kind of this light emitting onto our Pokemon here. So that's what we're doing now. I've inverted the mask and painting this in. I'm taking my time with this. I'm going to use several different layers to accomplish this, and we can even make these eyes pop just a little bit as well. So let's add a little bit more glow to them, and we can start adding the highlights here. So right above that thigh, that's where it's going to be the brightest point, so we'll just bear that in mind. You always want to think about that. The closest parts to the light source, obviously, is, you know, to use your common sense, it's going to be the brightest spots, and the places that's not directly there is going to be darker. So just simple knowledge, and that's going to help guide us through painting this on here and selling this effect. Alright, so let's brighten up the tail and body just a little bit more here. And now we're going to just enhance this move. And I'm using a different nebula image here to help with this effect, warping it into place. I just, you know, I want to give it some extra little bit of detail, so it's not just kind of like a ball. I want to add some more cooler effects. And then this image here is really awesome. I love this. I'm glad I found this. This little lightning bolt here. So just put this in place. We're gonna make a copy of that, put this up top, and then we're just gonna brush and paint black on our layer mask to get rid of some of this, because we don't need all of it. It's easy to get carried away, so don't go crazy with it. And on linear dodge add here, we're adding a little bit of glow. And here we are, ladies and gentlemen. This is our main composition. At this point now, we just need to add the final little details and adjustments to this to really bring this picture to life. But because it's very repetitive steps, I'm going to speed through it so you can still see the process. Enjoy the rest of the video. I'll see you at the finish line. Alright folks, here we are with that final composition of Mewto, and I have to say that Mewto has got to be my favorite Pokemon composition that I have made so far. This was actually a project that I've been wanting to do for quite a few months now, and I just kept pushing it off because I ended up doing other projects instead, but I'm happy that I got to make this and share it with you all. I hope you enjoyed the process. If you do like these Pokemon compositions, I do have other videos, so go ahead and check them out. Let me know what you think down there in the comment section. But overall, thanks for joining me for this video. Hope to have you back again for the next one here. If you want me to do more Pokemon compositions, just let me know who you would like to see. Take care, everybody. Hope to see you soon.